Hi, I'm Tammy Taylor, an inner work life coach focusing on MDT, a condition in which the mother projects unhealed aspects of herself onto her child, causing emotional and/or physical trauma. In cases where the mother is not ready, willing, or able to heal her own MDT, because it is a cycle, loving detachment is required for the child to live a healthy, happy, and whole life. And that's what we learn here at the Academy, is how to live in loving detachment, because it's not going to change in the way that we want it to. All things change, everything changes. And sometimes mama completely turns around and we move on and we go into the sunset. But for most of us with MDT, who are empaths with the mother wound, this is not the case. We are old souls who are having an experience of evolutionary self-love and spiritual independence. We are in an academy, a soul academy of loving detachment. We're learning to accept what is so that we are not reliant on the validation and confirmation of others. We kind of become more resilient, so to speak. We don't need the support of others in order to be spiritually independent, in order to stand on our own too. As these are some of the last incarnations in the physical form, we have to release the physical form of the mother, birth mother and earth mother, okay? And so we have to be able to resonate with the higher maternal frequency. And so that's why we are so highly sensitive. Not all highly sensitive people, HSPs, are empaths, but all empaths are highly sensitive people. Empaths do not just have the mother wound, we have MDT. And when we talk about power, or what we do or how we act, we always act in ways that are reflective of our soul maturity. We have learned certain things about power. We have learned that we think before we act. What is the acronym THINK? Is it true? Is it helpful? For the H, I, is it inspiring? N, is it necessary? K, is it kind? We've learned that. And we're very considerate of others to a fault. We are very giving because we have learned through many lifetimes that that is the most productive way to be if you do not want to incur heavy karma. And yet we find ourselves in what feels like a tremendous burden with MDT. That happens because we have also had lifetimes where we learned those lessons, that it is good to be caring, it's good to be loving, by being not so caring and not so loving. It's not a punishment. It's an inevitable stage of soul evolution that we find ourselves in the last earthly incarnations. And so we find ourselves at this place looking at our power from that second definition, compelled by an engine. How do we properly use energy that is compelled by an engine? What is the engine? The engine is our soul. The soul incarnates as us, through us, and one day will release this physical form. We have many skulls in the ground. And so that's why we talk about the soul at MDT Academy. We talk about the maturity of our souls, not in comparison to others, but as a sense of being able to locate ourselves in relationship to others. Highly sensitive people are only 20% of the population, and empaths are less than half of that. The stats are like 2 to 3%, but I would say more like 5, especially these days, and rapidly becoming 10% of the population are people who are extremely highly sensitive, that we are able to pick up the emotions of others, in auditory sound, feelings, these clairs that we have as well. All of these things we discussed throughout the academy. And so this is part of the engine that we're really talking about, that we get our power from. And that is what control is the ability to, execute power. And to properly use that is to fulfill the MDT soul contract, which is to evolve in self-love and spiritual independence. That is the proper use of power for ourselves. To focus on where in our lives we are needing self-love. How do we need to love and take care of ourselves? That being the priority is how we properly use our power. How do we evolve in spiritual independence? How do we pay attention to exactly what it is Spirit is telling us, the way it is telling us what we need to know? What signs and symbols are showing up in our lives? What are we being guided to see? Today the sun moved a sign, and I like to greet the sun when it does that on the horizon and do a sun salutation. And it was just such a magical thing to have a little bitty baby hair underneath the bougainvilleas, just sitting there like I wasn't right up on it, and just letting me just look at her, as she was just sitting there. And it was just beautiful to have that experience and to be able to connect with Spirit speaking to me through that little precious little rabbit at this, sun, symbolizing in the Vedic astrology the soul. The soul has been reborn. And I really do feel that in so many ways, and that great mother is just looking on me with so much love, kindness, and tenderness, and has me protected in such beauty that has thorns. You can't get to it, you can't touch it, you can come close. You can get up and you take a look, but you're not going to be able to hurt this precious little, And so the symbolism is so important to us. When we redirect our focus to that kind of self-love and spiritual independence, we experience less and less of the use of our power by others. Others see it, and they may not consciously appreciate it, but they drain us of it all the time, because it is very useful, to have someone around you that is going to give you insight 24/7 when you ask. No matter how you ask, whether you're asking it in a respectful way or whether you're saying things like, "So who do you think you are?" And then we're constantly trying to explain and justify, and, because that validation just hasn't been there. We haven't received a lot of maternal validation, because many times our mothers are empaths as well. MDT is a cycle. And she has gone through the same thing, and many times has shut off emotionally and is displaying those same types of controlling behaviors on us. Because in abandonment, what we experience is this sense of unworthiness of the mother's presence. Provision and protection as well, but it's more the presence is that abandonment. With maternal abuse, we have a lack of the provision and a lack of the presence, but what the abuse signifies really is a misuse of the maternal power to protect. And that is what is thrown askew. And that misuse of power confuses within us not just a sense of self-worth, but a sense of being lovable. Okay? worth loving, because we protect what we love, we protect what we value. And so we see the world value and protect things that are pretty, women, material items, homes, insurance, this and that. We protect things that have this material kind of glamour and glitter associated with it. But there's a devaluation of what is needed in terms of internal protection. And so everyone is very, very needy of attention from others, as we see in the current culture. Everyone is extremely needy of that, to the degree that we have to talk about boundaries 24/7, because we are crossing boundaries in order to demand others' attention, whether it's constant advertising or just constant bantering and badgering of issues and topics and news and this and that. Look at me, look at me, look at this. And what happens with an empath is that this becomes very controlling, because we're absorbing it all. And so it tends to kind of govern our days, how we're going to manage this energy that we're receiving from others, because we haven't established our own boundaries. And that is an improper use of control, because we do have control. It's just that doing the work to take it back from others who have taken it is something that we tend not to, again, divert our attention away from the external to the internal to do, because that's an inside job. We have to get to the source of, how can we address these behaviors that we're experiencing in order to correct our experience of them. We're not going to change that there's news every day. We're not going to change that mama behaves a certain way, or our siblings, or our spouse, or at work, or whatever. But the inside work of changing our experience of those things has to do with how much we love ourselves and how much exposure we allow ourselves to have based on the control we exert over our own time and space. Many of us get easily exhausted and drained because there's a lack of that inside work. And the inside work is being really clear about what needs to be corrected for us. A lot of times we'll approach people and we'll say, I really do need, some downtime. Or I really, would appreciate if the music wasn't so loud. I can't, think, when it's that way. And we'll ask for certain things that our sensitivity is requiring us to have, just to feel balance inside of our bodies, and not, attacked. It feels like an attack, really. And we get really emotionally dysregulated and can, after being dismissed and disregarded, go from 0 to 10, in a minute, because we just are spent. But when we do the inside work of really getting down in our journals and writing, okay, so this is really problematic for me to have this loud noise. This is really problematic for me to have the news. And we really start to just write things out and value them ourselves. Oftentimes we want other people to value us before we're actually doing the work of loving ourselves enough to even get clear about what our needs are. We want other people to just appreciate we've asked for something, instead of us appreciating that this is what I need. So whether this person is going to supply it to me or not, because I need it, I'm going to have to get it. I'm going to have to get the peace and quiet somewhere, somehow. I'm going to have to be able to go half the day at least without news banter. Excuse me. I'm going to have to be able to go at least half the day without news banter. I'm going to have to, and getting really clear about that birthright. What is in my experience happiness? What is in my experience health? What is in my experience wholeness? And many of us, in doing that, find that we can abbreviate our lives in a way to have that health, happiness, and wholeness. I've been working from home for the last 2 years. They said you can go in the office and there's hardly anybody there. So I could bring my music and I could whatever, and that spend the half day there and then come home. I can do, whatever that modification is for you is what the next exploratory step is to address that improper use of control, which is stemming from us not having done that. And we'll try different things until we get it right. And what ends up happening is that even though the first thing that we may have tried may not work, by the third, fourth, and fifth time we've narrowed down who we're having the issue with is observing the work that we're doing and how important it is to us and how our absence is making the heart grow fonder and the relationship begins to shift and begins to change. Now, intuitively, we may know that and we may not want that because we can't control what that change is going to ultimately look like. And so we will avoid in order to avoid the change. But that is a misuse of power as well, because we can't control the outcome. The only thing that we can control is our own behavior and how we relate to that engine that's generating our very lives. So that's the first thing. Looking at where is this power coming from that I have to control my life? And how am I allowing others to take my power and to control my life? What decisions do I need to make to address this and to follow through with it to correct this? Okay. And ultimately to avoid this cycle perpetuating with my child, who, just like I learned from my mother, is learning from me how to address these situations and how to take care of myself. And going through this process, talking with my child, saying, hey, I really do need some time and I really do need some space. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to work and I'm going to do this and just restructure what needs to be restructured and make it part of a a mother-child dialogue. And now you have a little bit more energy. You have a little bit more bandwidth to hear what's going on with your child every day. And for your child to experience your presence more, to experience the joy of your provision more, and the realness of your protection, because you're protecting yourself. And by protecting yourself and what your needs are for health, happiness, and wholeness, their emotional health, happiness, and wholeness is supported. Talking about the use of power has many sides, and having been an inner work life coach now for 12 years with this and having worked on my own MDT for over 20, I can say that whether it's a husband, whether it's a son, whether it's an auntie, whether it's an uncle, whether it's a grandparent, a coworker, sibling, this affects all of us so much. So when we feel that we are being abused is when we need to make these decisions. There's no other validation needed, sweethearts. There's no other investigation, research, corroboration of your story. when you, as an empath, someone who we have to remember that everything has, you know, a blessing and everything has a burden to it. We have to always remember that. And as old souls, we intuitively know this, but we always are trying to hedge our bets. We're always trying to um, err on the side of, we always want to err on the side of positivity, or we want to err on the side of um, abundance, you know. And while that is good, wise, and godly, there are times when we need to exercise constraint, because the blessing of control is that it allows us to govern our divinity. We are dearly loved divine children of the great Mother, Father God, who are never judged, condemned, or left alone. And having that power gives us the control of our lives. So when we feel abandonment and abuse, we really have to determine, first of all, you know, is it emotionally, physically, all the above, you know, and once we determine that, and for the most part it's emotional with us, we're going to have to add up the costs. What are the opportunity costs? I learned this at the London School of Economics. There are opportunity costs. Economics is a social construction. We create our means of exchange, the value of our resources and manufacture. The energy exchange is based on a value. It is marketable if it is a mutually agreed upon value. If I say the hamburger's $10, that's a value. It is a marketable exchange if it is a mutually agreed upon value. So you got people who are willing to pay $10 for a burger, it's marketable. That means it can be sold. We're not talking about the marketplace when we're talking about our feelings. Emotions are feelings, you know, that mad, sad, glad, joyful, scared, and our thoughts. Oh boy, I've learned so much from this woman, Cindy Dale. She has so many wonderful books. That's the new chakra healing. But she defines emotions as, you know, those basic feelings plus a thought. Emotions are feelings plus a thought. What is our thought about feeling sad? May feel sad, but what is the engine behind it? What is the power generating the sadness? Is a thought. Again, we have siblings that do not experience mama drama trauma because their thought is probably nothing. Mama just talking smack, it don't bother me, you know, or they rationalize and validate it in some other way. We do the same thing, but it creates cognitive dissonance with us when we do that because our core belief is in divinity identity. As old souls, we do know that we are divine beings having a physical experience, whether we articulate that or not. As old souls, that's what makes you an old soul. And so to be treated and mistreated, okay, to be misused, abused, or abandoned is a contradicting experience. But in order to allow the experience to continue, there has to be a thought that validates it. Oh, you know, it's okay. That's mama. We have cognitive dissonance as a result of that. Okay. But with our siblings who tend to be younger souls or older souls who already live in loving detachment, and so they really are not bothered by it. Okay. Um, it doesn't. That doesn't have a marketable value. In other words, do not compare one to the other. We are who we are, we feel the way we feel, and we have to validate it. We can't demand others see us and hear us when we don't see and hear ourselves. And so it doesn't matter whether or not anybody else buys it. If that is how you feel, that is how you feel, and we have to own it in order for us to process the emotion. Many of us are walking around here blocked with all types of intestinal issues and IBS and this, whatever, because energetically, the engine, the soul, is constantly bringing up the urge to evolve in us. That's our power. That's the juice that we're running on. But we're running against it by resisting the evolution and not processing our emotions. We have to first own the thought, I'm a dearly loved divine child of great mother, Father God, who's never judged, condemned, or left alone. What the hell is going on here? This is not, according to Hoyle here. And getting into that spiritual independence that allows us to tap into a higher wisdom to convey to us what the experience is teaching us. And that's what the Oracle deck helps us do on a daily basis. I used it today, just before starting here, with some issues with family, because living in loving detachment is an ongoing thing. Loving detachment is accepting what is. And what is that this is a shadow experience this lifetime that we will continuously be integrating, and others will continuously be interrupting us per soul contract, supporting us in our evolution in self-love and spiritual independence. It requires tremendous self-love to stay in peace, not in spiritual bypass that says, I'm too blessed to be stressed, child, and just as miserable and sick and toxic as you want to be. But truly in a state of peace requires a lot of just doing the work, maintaining the boundaries, accepting what is. And what is this is mama drama trauma, and I have accepted it. I have asserted my emotions. I have communicated, and it has not been received. Typical. Okay, this is not just me, it's not just you, this is a planetary disorder, great mother told me when she first downloaded the Oracle deck. So the proper use of power begins with us when we acknowledge things are what they are. Our relationship with our mother is what it is. Can it potentially change in the future? I no longer have hope against hope, because that kept me in a constricted state. It kept me in a state of being controlled, okay, by the toxic narrative that I was wrong, that what I was feeling was incorrect. Everything else that I was feeling that was supporting and encouraging everyone and all of this, the healing and all of that, that was fine. But when it was going to go deeper into what was going to free me to heal myself, it became a problem. This is typical. And so I want you to anticipate this and understand that this is part of the process. And again, what we intuitively know, we fear. We know intuitively that at some point it's going to get to a place where we have to make these difficult decisions. And I'm here to confirm it with the encouragement. You have the power, the engine behind you, an old soul that can execute the proper restraint and personal government of your divinity necessary in order to fulfill this with the support that you need. Now, the book goes more into that process of acknowledgement and how you step through the raw emotions of this in order to get to the other side of loving detachment and that daily work. But I just wanted to let you know that when you feel you're being abused, you're being abused. with the caveat, our shadow child, our shadow is a wounded narcissist inner child. This narcissist inner child is also written about in the book in terms of its different ways it shows up, depending on what kind of empath we are. And so the caveat is, as long as you do not have, as long as you're not in a state of expressing this narcissistic behavior as a daily norm, in other words, as long as you're not walking around as an empath who has been so wounded, okay, that you are easily triggered, and that's what triggers our unhealed wounds. You're easily triggered into controlling others with your empathic abilities. You are easily triggered into antisocial behavior. We all need space as empaths. We do need to be able to um, decompress. But if we are actually cutting people off from our human experience and we're not connecting as human beings unless they fit a list of criteria that we see, we can list that kind of stuff real good, which is why I know that we have the ability to do the other side of that work, to integrate that narcissist inner child that is crying and in some cases terrified of other people because of the wounding. If we are able to get the support and the love that we need from ourselves enough by diverting what we give to others or by misusing, applying it to ourselves, self-abusing in that way, that's self-abuse. Cutting ourselves off from everybody unless they fit this criteria. Meanwhile, spirit is sending us signs and symbols that we need a particular type of person. It might not be who we want or who we like right now, but it's who our spirit needs in order to feel loved. But we're so out of touch with that, we don't know what that is, and we're constantly trying to define it. I hope that's making some kind of sense to someone, because this is a very typical default we have as empaths with the mother wound. We will be triggered by things to such a degree because we're so emotionally dysregulated. Okay, we have what they call in PTSD an exaggerated stress response. You know, we respond to stress in a very exaggerated way. Either there's a great deal of panic or there's complete emotional shut off. The caveat is for those of us who fit either of those extremes, because you're not going to be able to trust your assessment of being abused. You're not going to be able to trust your assessment of being abandoned because you are too dysregulated. And I hope I've given you enough qualification for that. And if you are in that situation, you probably are already in therapy now, or definitely seeking it, or listening to things like MDT Academy, working with the Mama Drama Trauma Healing Oracle deck or other decks. You're a reader, you're an astrologer, because that's your daily practice. We have to have a spiritual practice in order to balance our emotions. Great Mother offers us clarity, balance, and confirmation. Clarity of how we're feeling, balance of our emotions that are dysregulated. Great Mother knows. It's no surprise. That's why there's nothing to be ashamed of or to apologize for. This is what our experience is. This is what it's about. This is the beauty of it. We're doing deep evolutionary work this lifetime, and we are here to live in loving detachment, accepting what is, so that we can experience love and share love with others who are also needing and wanting to heal. So as you move to the MDT Academy, I hope that you are coming to some real nuggets of resources and ideas that you can use in your soul evolution. Because right here and right now, many of us just want to know, can therapy help mama? Can this abusive situation be um, be remedied somehow? You know, can I learn to better care for my children, having experienced this? I see how I'm showing up as my mother in my children's lives, and I don't want to, um, you know, embark on a path that I have no idea where I'm going, or how to operate without coercion or without force, because that's what we tend to do a lot of times too. We say, well, we're going to change, and I know I have the power to change, and we'll begin to exert this control that we cannot maintain because we haven't done the inner work to have a strong enough foundation. So, in answer to the question whether or not we can reverse the cycle, we absolutely can. That's why we're here. And right now, in real time in our lives, how that shows up is by communicating our boundaries once we have defined them, as in the previous step of addressing the abuse, acknowledging it, and looking at what needs to be corrected and journaling those things and going on that process. It's then, after we have done those things, that we can divert our attention and we can begin to actually say, okay, this is the situation. I understand in the past, I have been very forthcoming with my time and spending time here all day, and trying to work outside of the distractions for me. But I'm going to need to go back to work, and so I'm going to need somebody here to take care of the kids that part of the day. And so sometime of the day while you're here, I'm going to really need this to happen, this to happen, this to happen, and I'll be home in the afternoon, and this to happen when I get home, and this and this and this might not necessarily. Okay, this is what those kinds of details are what we have to express repetitively with people in our environments in order to be heard, in order to be seen the way we need to be heard and seen. But of course, that first happens with us doing that inner work in order to bring out what needs to be seen, in order to speak what needs to be heard. So this is where the therapy comes into play, because those of us who are in therapy are aware of these things and are beginning to really work on these things individually on a weekly basis with our therapists and reporting back. I know it has, throughout my healing process with coaches and all sorts of healers, been imperative to my process. That's why I could create an oracle deck. I read from so many of them, and was referred to so many healers and books and things. I just showed you Cindy Dale's New Chakra Healing. She has many others, but The Dragon doesn't live here anymore. Alan Cohen, Living Fully, Loving Freely. Of course, Jan Spiller's New Moon Astrology, those new moon wishes, Great Mother Energy is very important. Every month we align with that higher maternal energy in order to cast our wishes based on the energy of that sign, and see what happens 6 months from then when that very same sign has its full moon, and we can see the harvest of our wishes. That is so much fun and so bountiful for me. Again, Druid Oracle, love that deck. It's the Animal Oracle, to read the signs and symbols like the rabbit. Sai Baba for beginners. This is a great little illustrated book. I love it. Sai Baba, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, Debbie Ford. I mean, just so many great books, and I'm going to just have to talk about some of these books sometimes, but you get what I'm saying about the process of learning, and learning ourselves cannot be discounted. This is how you will begin to influence people. This is how you'll begin to give your insights. This is how you'll begin to engage in conversations with people or not, and be completely happy about whether people choose to engage with you or not, because there's so much to learn about ourselves, and there's so much to explore about ourselves, and there's so much love and so much life that wounded narcissist inner child needs, that we again divert our energy toward giving that to others in the external locus of our power, to building up that internal locus of power, that internal focus on who and what we are, what our needs are, so that we are engaged participants in our therapy. Therapy is healing, and we should always be engaged with our doctors. We should always be engaged with our healers in order to get what we need from the process. So we have to be ready, able, and willing in order to do this healing work. In answer to, can therapy help our mothers? Absolutely. They're ready, able, and willing. We will absolutely encourage. We are very encouraging, but we do have to have some type of effort in order for us to know that there is potential for change. Otherwise, there's no sense of deluding ourselves. Again, it's accepting what is with love. And finally, other resources that we can use for the proper use of our power is simply by observing those in our immediate environment and in the world who execute power in a way that resonates with us. You know, there are people who run businesses, and there are people who run organizations and homes that we admire because of the way they organize their lives, because of the way they interact with people and make people feel and make us feel. Those are resources that we can definitely tap into in order to glean from them the characteristics that we so admire and that we need support in our own growth process. So I hope that has been helpful in yours today. Thank you for subscribing to the blog. But above all and most of all, remember, Great Mother loves you, and I do too.